Hey there, it's the Board Game Bandit, and today I want to talk about my wall of shame. Some of you may not know what this term means, and admittedly, I have a different definition than the rest, which I'll get to in a second. Generally, a wall of shame refers to the part of your game collection that you haven't played yet. Typically, this only describes games that you have had for a significant amount of time, and walls of shame tend to be large, not just a handful of games. For my own definition, I widened my wall of shame to include games that I haven't played enough to justify owning them for the money that I spent. Basically, if I play a game that I own only once, I don't remove it from my metaphorical wall of shame. I often see a lot of wall of shame games being sold online in groups of 10, even 20 or more. These are often new in shrink, and it makes me wonder why we keep finding ourselves in this position. If someone only plays a game once just to see that they played it, I think this actually reduces the value of the game since it can no longer be sold in pristine condition. I don't have this problem because I open up all of my boxes immediately upon receipt and verify that all the components are there and in good condition. Early in my gaming career, I had terrible luck where about 25% of my games had either missing or damaged parts. And when I don't remember to do this check, of course that is the game that has the problem. But to play a game once, even when already opened, isn't enough for me to justify ownership because I could accomplish that with a friend's copy or at a convention library. I want to play a game at least 3 or 4 times, maybe even more if it was particularly expensive. Before I describe the cause of the problem of walls of shame, I want to say a little bit more about the symptoms. Walls of shame seem to be a fairly ubiquitous problem, and I believe that once you own 100 or more games, it is almost guaranteed that you will have a wall of shame and that it will never go away completely. You'd have to go out of your way to address the issue, which creates stress in gaming, and many players are dissuaded from that influencing their gaming choice. For me personally, I record how much I pay for each game and mark which games I've never played as well as which games I haven't played enough. I've spent over $400 on games I've never played, and in truth, this number is inaccurate because it doesn't include games I received as gifts. For example, I got Caverna as a gift about 3 years ago and still haven't played it. That should be valued at least $70, maybe even more, which doesn't factor into that $400. When you consider the games I haven't played enough to justify owning, it's closer to $1,000. And that doesn't even factor in expansions to games I know I'll eventually play a lot, like Nightfall and Dominion. Since I'm constantly playing those games with new players, I'm never getting around to the more advanced content. Finally, the other inaccuracy comes from the fact that I recently made one of those very pushes to drive down my wall of shame, and clearly I did not make much of a dent. So why does this happen? I can only speak for myself, but I could speculate on a few reasons. I certainly don't set out to spend a bunch of money to sit on a shelf. I have better things to do with my money, well, I'm not sure what I would do if I stopped buying games, but every single time I try and stop, something always pulls me back in, and this alludes to the first 2 reasons, sales and availability issues. Depending on where you shop for games, sales may or may not be a reality. But sometimes a game is too good to pass up at a particular price, whether it's a daily sale, markdown, clearance, or any form of discount. When I'm in this situation, I generally think that I will want to own this game, and I may not be able to see it at the same price again. My thought process is, better to spend less money now than more money later because I tend to not worry about purchases I've made in the past, whereas I fret over purchases I'll make in the future. A number of my friends have had this same problem when Amazon has one of their massive board game sales, or after Black Friday or other holiday deals. The reality is, these games are purchased when we already have a wall of shame, and the new titles only exacerbate its size. Sales might also trick us into buying games we weren't necessarily bullish on but the chance for a steal is too tempting to ignore. Availability might be another consideration. If I don't buy a game now, I may not get the opportunity again because it might go out of print indefinitely. This is a problem that's pretty unique to board gaming. I can think of several examples where I either bought one of the last copies of a game for fear of not owning it, even though I'm several games deep in my backlog. I can also think of games that I bought immediately upon reprint, having chosen not to purchase them before they went out of print, and now I'm trying to correct my mistake. For example, Arctic Scavengers is an interesting deck building game that came out shortly after Dominion, but to much less fanfare. I played it a lot with my first gaming group and really enjoyed it, and we knew then that it was going to go out of print. But my friend owned it, so why should I buy my own copy? Well, later on I decided to move, and now I lost access to the game. When it was finally reprinted in 2015, I bought it the day it came out, where it sat on my shelf for a while because it's really hard to bring to the table. I know for a fact that I bought at least 3 Nightfall expansions because I unexpectedly found them and knew that if I passed on that purchase, I'd probably never see them again. The point about Arctic Scavengers leads me to the next cause, which is that some games are really hard to bring to the table. Often, what game gets played is a factor of setting, time constraints, mood, audience, and actually having the game nearby. With a significant collection, it's impossible to bring every game with me everywhere, which means I must make a choice as to what to bring to game nights outside my home. How much time do we have to play? Is this the rare opportunity where we have the right amount of time to learn something new and play something longer? Is it going to be noisy, making games that require a lot of concentration an issue? Will we be distracted by the presence of others or restricted by table space? Time and setting matter tremendously. The last two are particularly finicky, mood and your actual opponents, because they are difficult to predict. You may bring a game, but not feel like playing it with the people around you. Some personality types don't work well with specific games, and you'd rather have a great experience some other time than suffer through something subpar for your first time because you know a player will struggle or not like it. All of these factors combine to highlight how difficult it is bringing some games to the table. For over 5 years, my copy of Power Grid, one of the most celebrated games of all time, went unplayed. Why? Because gamers would tell me that it's a phenomenal game, but runs long at higher player counts, is extremely mathy, and takes up a lot of space. That doesn't sound like a ringing endorsement for a game I want to play right away, especially outside the comfort of my home. These 3 factors combined into a perfect storm when I decided to take a chance on the Ares project, a game I still haven't played that has been in my collection for about 3 years. It was on sale, it was likely to go out of print, and it has a very steep learning curve. But everything I heard about the game indicated that it would be reminiscent of a turn-based tactical game like you'd play on PC, and that had me really excited. But it also has an odd player count in that it really works best with 2 or 4, not 3. I have enough trouble finding opportunities to play a straightforward 20-minute 2-player game, so a longer one will have even more trouble getting to the table. I haven't given up on the game. I even outsourced the rules learning to friends so that they could play it and come teach me, but it still hasn't happened, and they likely forgot everything by now. Knowing how little time I have these days, do I want to take a chance on a game ranked in the mid-2000s on BoardGameGeek, or do I want to play a game I love several times with people who already know how to play it? It's a tough call. The next reason I think Wall of Shames are predominant is because explaining rules take up so much time that sometimes we just want to hit the ground running and play something familiar. I don't like to play particularly long games. 45 to 75 minutes is around my sweet spot, maybe 90 at the most. So when I say that I only played 14 games in 24 hours for International Tabletop Day, you can see how much time is lost to rules explanations. As a courtesy to my friends, who may not always like playing a game once, you want to feature the same games over and over again. You also get tired of explaining the same game repeatedly, and the chance to avoid explanation may be too good to pass up. It even helps when all but one person knows the rules, as you only need to worry about a single person catching on. There is a lot of comfort in the familiarity, and that makes it harder to bring a new game to the table. But the final reason why I think walls of shame are so pervasive is perhaps the most subtle, and it has to do with the size of your collection. My collection is supposedly at 219 games, but in reality, it is much, much larger. Instead, my collection is the unique intersection of all games of everyone in my gaming group who is dealing with the same problem. I've tried to math it out, and I think I could play my 200 games every year at least once per year. This still isn't enough for me, but it does meet the traditional wall of shame ineligibility requirement. But that assumes I am only playing what I own and never what my friends own, which isn't the case. Each of us is trying to solve the same problem, and we end up complicating it for one another. I might have a game I really want to play, but so do two of my other friends, and as a result, no one makes meaningful progress in reducing their wall of shame. In my gaming group, I have at least 5 friends who have significant collections as well, so it wouldn't surprise me if there are over 700 unique titles among us. The only way for me to consistently have a small wall of shame is to stop buying games and cull my collection, which I don't see happening, or to become extremely selfish and authoritarian, which I don't want to happen either. I want to experience new games, and I want my friends to feel like it's a group and not a dictatorship. Even if I were to stop buying games, I still have to contend with my friends trying to solve the same problem, and we make it worse for each other. I have a friend who is ambitiously trying to knock out his wall of shame by the end of the year through aggressive playing and targeted culling, and I applaud him for that. But if I've invested money in these games, I don't want to get rid of them. I want to enjoy them. I always feel like everyone has more time than me, and that I don't get to play games as much as people think, certainly not as much as other members of the podcasting community, and I don't have the time to always orchestrate a wall of shame reduction. I'm sick of just scratching the surface on games when there is so much more content to explore. I want to be able to play advanced scenarios of a game like Last Night on Earth, or to use my Nightfall expansions. Whether it's starting my monthly game night with an unplayed game or scheduling the harder ones, I need to get this down to a more manageable size. In software engineering, we have something called the refactoring myth. Refactoring means to reorganize code you've already written because it can be improved or generalized for reuse. It's estimated that about 80% of refactoring is identified but never actually happens, and that's how I view a wall of shame. It's always going to be there, it's just the nature of gaming. To anyone who is able to resist the compulsion to buy, you're a much stronger person than I am. I really hate seeing gamers selling large parts of their unplayed collection, and every time I wonder, is that inevitably going to be me? That's not who I want to become. Tell me about your experience. Do you find it difficult to keep up with your wall of shame? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for listening. I'm the Board Game Bandit, and our game has just begun.